Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a books beside my bed video for you where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading. This was my last week of summer break, so I'm going back to work on Monday. I don't know how I feel about that. I'm definitely not out of holiday mode, but I did read 9 books in the last week, 7 of which I'm going to talk about in this video because 2 of them were DNFs. Okay, so we are going to start with the DNFs just because I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about them. And one that I'm really sad that I DNF'd, but it wasn't working for me, was 10 Things That Never Happened by Alexis, which is kind of like a While You Were Sleeping reimagining, retelling, and it is about a guy who works for sort of like a big box company who is about to lose his job, and after his boss has just fired him, he ends up falling into a shower glass door thing and bumps his head. And his boss mistakenly assumes that he has amnesia. And so he plays it up. And I'm not a fan of lying in romances. It bothers me quite significantly. And this one goes on and on. I think I got about 50% of the way into the book. I was listening to the audio as well. Ultimately, I had to put it down. The reason I picked it up, I knew that it had this trope in here. And I picked it up because it's Alexis, and if anyone can get me through a trope that I don't like, it's Alexis, but he couldn't in this one. So I may come back to it and try it at another point in time, but I struggled. I struggled a lot. The other book that I DNF'd was Whenever You're Ready by Trish Bolton. This one was sent to me for review by Ellen and Unwin, and I'm very grateful to them for doing that. This is a contemporary fiction story, and I got a couple of chapters into it before I had to put it down because it was just not my thing. Like, the writing style was great. I started reading and I was just getting through chapters, but I was really not enjoying myself while I was reading. So it's about Lizzie, Alice, and Margot. Margot is Lizzie's daughter, I believe, and the 3 of them are at a bit of a crossroads in their life. Lizzie and Alice, I believe, are in their late 60s or early 70s. One of their friends has just unalived themselves and their husband. And the book starts out with that grief and that shock of that happening. I am 100% positive that this is a very great, powerful story. I'm just not the intended target audience for it. All right, so then I read Rock Chick by Kristen Ashley. This is for the read-along that took place over the weekend. So I will pop a link to the live show on the screen for you. And it was a really entertaining time. Now, I will say this is very much of its time. Some of the language and the alpha hero trope in here is a bit much at times, but it was a fun story. And as much as Lee, the MMC of the story, bothered me at times because he's incredibly possessive. Like, he's that archetypal possessive alpha hero that you got in a lot of romance books, 10 years ago. What I can say is how much I loved Indy, who just finds herself getting caught up in all sorts of crazy things that are happening. She owns a bookstore. It's a very casual, laissez-faire kind of place. And then one of her workers goes missing, apparently with, I think it's missing diamonds. And so suddenly she gets caught up in the people that are going after him. And then people have their sights set on her. And she and her friend start investigating their friend's disappearance, and they can't keep out of it. And then Lee's trying to stop things from happening to Indy because she keeps getting shot at. Like, it doesn't let up. This story, like, something happens very, very quickly after the last event. And if you're just looking for an enjoyable read and you can kind of just go, okay, I know it's a possessive hero. I know that this is going to stretch the limits of my belief a little bit, then you're fine, because it was really funny. Like, there are some really funny quips in the book. So I had a good time reading it. I did say I'm not a fan of Lee. Like, he's probably one of my least favorite MMCs that I've read in a while, but I loved Indy and I loved just the hijinks and the weird situations she found herself in. Then I read the last of my Kindle Jar picks that I hadn't started, and that was Beyond the Black Door by A.M. Strickland, which is a queer young adult fantasy story. So we follow Kamai, who loses her mother very violently at the start of the book. And she and her mother are soul walkers, which means they can travel to people's souls within their dreams. And they keep this hidden from everyone else. So her mother was a courtesan and a spy and is killed as a result of that. Kamai is left on her own. She doesn't really know who to trust. She doesn't trust her stepbrother, and we come to find out why towards the end of the book. But for her entire life, Kamai has never been able to access her own soul. In her dream space, she always sees this black door that her mother has told her to stay away from. And then after her mother's death, she kind of can't help it anymore. She ends up opening the black door and it draws her in. And eventually inside the black door, she meets Vahin, and we spend a lot of the book trying to figure out who and what exactly Vahin is, and it's deeply atmospheric. Kamai is asexual but doesn't understand that, and so there is a discussion in the book around asexuality and what that means and how people perceive that, and there's some internalized asephobia on Kamai's part because it's not something that she's ever heard about, and so she feels like she's weird and different to everyone else. There is this really warped relationship between Kamai and Vahin, and it's really interesting to explore. Like, it's very dark and twisty. Like, to me, this is the book that, and I know that they're completely they deal with sort of different fantasy tropes, but this feels like what Shadow and Bone and that first Holly Black Fae book, I can't remember the title. It feels like what those authors were trying to do by setting up a good character and the supposed villain of the piece. But those two books had absolutely nothing on the chemistry between Kamai and Vahin in this book. Kamai knows Vahin is up to no good. Like, she knows deeply, and there is still this draw. And that wasn't the point, but the chemistry between the characters was there, which I deeply appreciated. It's super atmospheric and was very cool, and I'm glad that I finally read it. I also read The Atlas 6 by Olivie Blake. I do actually have this physical book, but it's at the bottom of my book stacks behind my TBR cart, so I just didn't get it out yet. I actually listened to the audiobook for this. I had it out on Libby, and I'm glad that I did. It's very, very interesting. So it's a world where magic exists, and 6 people are selected who have unique magic to compete for or to vie for 5 positions at the Library of Alexandria. It's their first year, and in that first year they get to study they're studying things that are taught to them, but they also get to pursue their own independent line of inquiry, which is, you know, something that they're all interested in. They're all I think they're all mid to late 20s. They all begin to realize that they need alliances with one another. They very quickly find out that at the end of this initiation period, one of them has to die, and then they find out how that comes about. And so the entire time that they're there, they're exploring their magic, but they're also having to quickly learn about everyone else. And not everyone there is there with the best intentions. Some of them are incredibly manipulative. Their abilities are manipulative. And I was a bit caught up in all of the intrigue of it all. I will probably continue the second book. I'm intrigued to see what happens next. We do get a bit of a cliffhanger ending at the end. But yeah, it was a very intriguing world. It's very much like a dark academia kind of story with magic. So I'm curious. I'm curious about this one. I also read Peppercorn House by Nicole Hurley-Moore. This is a partially open door rural romance set in Australia. It is the story of Jasmine, who is in a small town with her young son. She has left her previous husband who cheated on her, and she works at an aged care facility. And one of the people there is Winifred, who is 84 years old and befriends Jasmine. And Winifred is also really good friends with a local photographer, Felix. Felix and his family run a wedding business in town, and he is the in-house photographer for them, but he also loves just to take other photos. He's a wonderful photographer, and he has always been obsessed with Winifred's old house, Peppercorn House. And because they've become friends, they've known each other for a long time, she gives him permission to go onto the property and to take photos. Felix is a really great guy, and unbeknownst to him, Winifred is planning on leaving the house to him when she passes, and she knows she's only got a limited time left. That's discussed at the start of the book. But when Winifred finds out that Jasmine and her son are being evicted from their rental apartment because the apartment block is being sold, and she's literally got nowhere to go. She's tried to find somewhere, but it's just not happening. She offers them a place to stay at Peppercorn House. Jasmine and Felix meet that way and begin to get to know one another and fall for one another, and Felix develops a really great relationship with Jasmine's son. We also have Jasmine's ex-husband, who is getting married but is also struggling to connect to his son, and we realize quite quickly that the reason that their relationship fell apart is because he was resentful of his son. And so there is a bit of gaslighting towards Jasmine, which she eventually begins to stand up to, which was really fantastic to see. The one part of the story that I didn't like is that one of Felix's exes is in the story, and she is just mean girl personified, and it was actually unnecessary in the story. And she continues to pursue Felix after he is repeatedly told her no, so she's not a great character. But you have both of their exes sort of interfering with their relationship at various points. Then underneath all of that, we learn a little bit about Winifred's life and the fact that her older sister went missing when Winifred was quite young, and so that mystery is solved by the end of the book as well. It was just a really lovely read. Like, it's a good afternoon cup of tea on the couch read. There's nothing that's too stressful in here. It was just a good time. And I haven't read Nicole Hurley-Moore in a while, so I was really glad to read another one of their books. I also reread Heartsong by TJ Klune, and hopefully by the time this video goes out, I'll actually have a vlog. I decided on a whim to vlog my reread of this. The re-release of Heartsong is coming out on the 30th of January, I believe, and this is my favourite book in the series. It's the third book in the Green Creek series, and it follows Robbie and Kelly's relationship. At the start of the book, Robbie is in a place we don't expect him to be, and his memories are very confused, and he's doing things that we wouldn't expect him to do. And then we quickly find out that he has been taken and his memories have been adjusted. And it's about how he finds his way back to the Bennett group. I will leave that video linked on the screen. I'm not going to talk about it too much here because it's got its own video and I talk a lot more and I react a lot more to rereading this book. I love all of the new covers for the Green Creek series, but this is seriously my favourite because Robbie and Kelly are just precious. And as I say every time I talk about this book, Kelly is ace, and the discussion around asexuality and Kelly and Robbie's relationship in this book, outstanding. I also read Famous Last Words by C.W. Farnsworth, which is book 1 in her Holt Hockey series. This is a college hockey series. I think I'm getting a review copy of the second book, possibly. So stay tuned. I decided I'd better read the first one. This is about Harlow and Connor. Connor is the captain of the college hockey team. They have been historically not great. The college itself is not known for its sports programs, but Connor is very passionate. He has plans to make it into the pro leagues, and this is his year to prove it, and it's going to start with the team tackling the championship head on. Harlow and Connor know of each other, and the entire time they've been at college together, there has been this kind of hate to love or animosity to love sort of relationship, because Harlow is best friends with Connor's half-brother, and Connor has a basically non-existent relationship with his father and his father's new family because of the way that his mother was treated when she was pregnant. So there is that strained family dynamic element in the story, and both Connor and Harlow consider each other complicit simply by proximity. But when Harlow starts training for a marathon, Connor ends up helping her with her training program, and so they begin to spend more time together, and they realize that actually they quite like each other, and the thing that's in between them is Connor's strained relationship with his biological father and his father's family. And so they have to figure out, you know, what this relationship even looks like and if they even like each other. C.W. Farnsworth seems to tend to write fairly hard-hitting contemporary romances, and I did like the approach to just sort of slowly getting Connor to think about his family and what he wants. And there is a little bit of a relationship that develops between him and his father towards the end of the book. It's not a full relationship, it's sort of still an ongoing thing, but I was glad to see that there was some development there as well. The last book that I read this week was Drop Bear by Evelyn Araluen, and this is an Indigenous poetry and essay collection by an Australian First Nations author. It was, I believe, her debut, and it also won the Stella Prize in 2022. And in this one, Evelyn is confronting the tropes of Australian iconography and pop culture and how it intersects with First Nations culture, or in most cases appropriates it and makes people feel like that they're doing a good thing by engaging in it. It definitely addresses colonialization with the aim of decolonization, and it is confronting and even a bit intimidating at times, but very worth it and a very important text. I think with all First Nations texts, you need to be able to sit with them for a while and you need to be able to unpack them. And I don't think that always happens straight away. But one of my favorite ways to sort of engage in a lot of these discussions is through essays and poetry collections by Australian First Nations authors. So I'm glad that I finally picked this one up. It's been on my radar for ages, and I'm just really glad that I finally got to it, and now I need to continue to explore more works. And then the last book that I'm going to mention is Fevered Star, which I'm currently listening to on audio. I am about 2/3 of the way through the audiobook at the moment, and this is the second book in the Beyond Earth and Sky series, which is a fantasy series. So I am actually finding this one a lot harder to follow than the first one. So I don't know if I'm going to continue the series when I finish it. I'm definitely going to finish this book because I'm invested and I'm in it now and I want to see it through. And it bothers me because I love Rebecca Roanhorse and I want to continue to read their work, but I just don't think the series itself is for me. So we'll see how I go at the end of it. I'll talk more about my final thoughts at the end of the series. I think there's a lot of characters and a lot of moving parts. My poor brain. This is why I don't do a lot of big fantasy books anymore because I can't keep up with all the characters. So yes, that is my reading wrap up for this week. In the comments, let me know if you have read any of these books or if you're planning on picking any of them up, or feel free to share something that you have been reading and loving in the last week. If you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave a leaf emoji down below. Otherwise, I hope that wherever you're in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Bye everyone.